when APNU came into office in 2015, they came in with great goodwill. They had sold a story that many people in this country bought, that they were competent, they had a clear plan to change the country, that the PPP had done a poor job at economic development and that they are going to change that. Secondly, that they were clean because the PPP was corrupt, and this was a clean group coming in to transform the country and to get rid of corruption. And three, that they were multiracial, that they catered for the interests of all Guyanese regardless of race. Three fallacies that were proven to be fallacies in their tenure in office. And today, every single Guyanese, every single person in this country, because they had a track record for 5 years, can now say with certainty that the last government was the most incompetent in our history, the most corrupt in our history, and the government that in such a short period managed to devastate in racial terms some of the communities that Indo-Guyanese and Amerindians lived in. We saw serious action that were dedicated towards removing large numbers of people from the public sector as part of a master plan to have either them migrate or dispossess them. So we now know for sure that they're not competent, they're not clean, and that they're probably the most racist government that we've ever seen. And we're happy that the country have had that exposure to them, because it makes very hollow their protestations now when you see them playing the victim. They're playing the victim now of all sorts of so-called government plots that people can now assess them based on their own track record. And you know what is gratifying to me? That there are a whole generation of Guyanese who grew up under the PPP in a condition of freedom. They could not relate to the early PNC and the attempt to rig elections in this country, how for 3 decades they hung on to power through rigged elections with devastating consequences for the political economy of this country, for people's livelihoods, and the consequences for national, social, and economic formation. Many of our people had to flee this country because they could not eat, they could not find a job. That was the real history of our country, when people were discriminated against. The police came to your home because of if you criticize the government. A whole generation of Guyanese did not even know that existed. They didn't even know. I spoke to many young people who didn't know that it was illegal to eat bread made from wheat in this country. They grew up because they grew up under the PPP. They took all the freedoms for granted. And those very same young people in 2015 were saying, oh, you need to give APNU a chance. You can't go back to history. They don't know the history. We don't know about that. Well, they got a little taste of it. They got a little taste of it, 5 years of it. And then they saw APNU in its full infamous glory of trying to rig the elections once again. And they saw how they, with impunity, they lied in a manner that came naturally to them. Until today, we have this view that their SOPs will show that they won the elections. And they keep saying this around the country, they won the elections, but can't produce a shred of evidence. They had the SOPs that we have. They could have easily made their case, presenting their SOPs. They saw APNU. They had over 2,000 polling agents, hardcore PNC, AFC people who were in those polling places, who signed those statements of poll. And APNU denied all of them. Like in the Bible, they just denied them. These are people who poured their hearts out for APNU and said the PPP bribed them to sign the statements of poll. And I don't know who will want to be a polling agent anymore ever again for that party. Because they did a great job, sat in the poll all day long, look out for their interests, signed the statements of poll, and then in the recount, that's their claim. But the country and young people in this country have seen APNU. This is the typical APNU.